you jumping through these hoops, the lies always continuing to rise and busting through the roof. I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They say they got it, but they're never coming up with proof. If you're looking, then they got you jumping.
This is a book about the dawn of human civilization. It goes back to a historical period called the Neolithic, the Chalcolithic era. It reflects the story of the oldest civilization known in Europe, called by the broadest term, Ancient Europe. This book represents a sensational discovery about the oldest known inhabitants of ancient Europe, whose ethnic name has come to us through the classical ancient writers such as Homer, Herodotus, Pythagoras, Plutarch, and many others. It tells us the story of the rediscovery of ancient Thrace and the people who were called from times immemorial simply the Thracians. These people were known to Herodotus as the most numerous ethnic group, second only to the Hindus, and to Homer, who wrote his Iliad, as people who reminded him of the gods. I will leave most of the story for others to tell, namely the archaeologists and the historians of the ancient past. My part to tell is only the smallest, yet it must be the most glorious, for it is about one aspect of the lives of these ancient people, the Thracians, that makes them a most unique ethnic group among their neighbors, when all things are taken into consideration. Our modern understanding of history shifts and changes faster than ever these days with the advent of the internet communications era. Reason is apparent. Unprecedented free and unhampered access to multiple global information streams, allowing the broadest ever data harvesting and source analysis. Such unique new possibilities are especially relevant to the researching of the most ancient history of the world, since access to the most ancient and unique document sources of the past had also been the hardest to get in previous years, for multiple reasons of various nature. This book redefines what most archaeologists and historians classify today as the prehistoric era, named so to denote a period of time lacking yet a system of writing, and thus signifying that a historical record had not yet been possible. And since this book identifies and decodes writing on artifacts from this time period, making it now historic due to the proven existing historical record, it shifts the known boundaries of the prehistoric era to at least a couple of millennia earlier in time. Furthermore, from the prehistoric texts decoded in this book, it becomes quite clear that the people who inscribed them were neither prehistoric nor primitive, contrary to the many so-called scientific models of the ancient past, but demonstrated highly sophisticated levels of thought expression, anticipated by modern science for a much later period of modernity. Exactly because of the above, this book may appear quite threatening and paradigm-shifting for some present scientific, historical, archaeological, and anthropological dogmas. Thus, it may trigger negative reactions and oppositions by those readers who remain unprepared for significant set of mind changes, and by those former authoritative figures in science who would rather deny this unique discovery than lose their personal scientific ground and territory. This must not come as a surprise, as it is inevitable that the conclusions resulting from a discovery of this nature will actually turn quite a few basic assumptions in modern science upside down, i.e., unless we understand that things have long been head down and now, being turned around once more, they will actually assume their due and rightful position. We should not forget, therefore, that such turbulent changes have always occurred with the major, more or less revolutionary inventions and discoveries of our time. And this should not only be expected, but also welcomed by the greater part of free-thinking and intelligent people. This is definitely not just another attempt at decoding the plates from Gradišnica, the 5th millennium BCE, and Karanovo, the 4th millennium BCE. This book makes all the difference, compared to all previous decades of works, presenting various already discarded suggestions, interpretations, and presumptions, and on and on and on, all failed attempts at decoding any of the engraved signs upon the plates, or even making informed guesses about their meaning. For the first time ever, in the scientific discourse laid out in this book, you will find the complete and final scientific decoding of each and every one of the pictographic signs upon both tablets, and the consequent results are, the least to say, unprecedented and sensational. What is especially unique about the reading of the prehistoric texts from these particular plates is the elegant research methodology used by the author to display, literally before the eyes of his audience, all the linguistic detail and artistry leading to the undisprovable and direct conclusions from the accurate final analysis of the hieroglyphic pictograms and their full meanings rendered. Some of the deciphered words in the text mentioning the name of Thrace and the territory of Thrace since around 7,000 years ago, such as on the plate of Gradišnica, as well as the evidence for well-defined Thracian Orphic themes since around 6,000 years ago on the plate from Karanovo, are bound to turn at least a few scientific heads. This is so exactly because until now, No one had dared to conceive that the Thracians could have been autochthonous, or originally native, population in those parts of the Balkans. Since such ancient times, especially because all classical Greek chronicles related the name of their ethnicity to the period of the Bronze Age, which was about a couple of millennia later. What's most astounding yet is the fact that the Thracian pictographic script, now decoded, was found on artifacts, the two plates named above, which are of such antiquity that it is now considered conclusively to be the first and oldest script ever known to mankind, predating the written artifacts from Sumer and Egypt by some extra 2 millennia, 2,000 years. On top of that, it now becomes evident that it was first developed and used by the Thracians, who have been labeled by historians for far too long as a people of no letters. It is worth mentioning the fact that these people of no letters evidently made use of this most ancient pre-hieroglyphic script for at least a millennium, or more, since the hieroglyphs identified on the plate from Gradishnitsa and the ones identified on the plate from Karanova have been found to be of the same type of pictographic writing. Therefore, it is very likely that a number of other findings from the same period, which have so far been defined as decorative artifacts, may also turn out to be literary documents, written in the same Thracian script. It will become clear from the discourse in the book that this particular script represents a special type of pre-hieroglyphic, identical in character and similar in style to its later counterpart, and possibly direct descendant, which we all know as Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, famous for style and beauty from its pyramid text specimens of a legendary epoch, notably over 2 millennia newer than that of the Thracian tablets. Some experts in the field may actually be so unprepared for a surprise of this magnitude that they may wish the plates were a fake, specially fabricated by an interested party. Luckily, however, the plates from Gradishnitsa and Karanovo are not a new discovery, but have been around for several decades and have been thoroughly tested by experts, and their genuineness, as well as accurate dating, have been certified. There have been hints and doubts about the possibility of identifying early pre-writing patterns upon them on numerous previous occasions. However, none such have been agreeably identified or decoded until this present final success. Analysis by authoritative sources have been done in the past, searching for similarities between the signs on the plates and other already known ancient scripts like Linear A, while the findings of others categorically rejected any notion that the signs represented a writing system at all, since they could not identify patterns of repetitiveness in the engravings, which could be the hallmark of any known linear writing system. Notwithstanding their differences of opinion about the nature of the artifacts themselves, however, most writers have agreed that if a type of writing was to be indeed identified on the above named plates, this could bring about a dramatic shift in our modern understanding of the ancient world. Well, mine is the privilege to announce that in the course of my present research, the ancient Thracian script has now been finally decoded, and the results are unprecedented and sensational. When no observer exists, who could conduct an observation of the world? This simply means that the observers and their definitions play primary roles for the state of being of the world such as we know it, and the potential for change of the same world is locked in the ability for transformation of these observers and definitions. This is a theorem of irrevocable validity and extraordinary existential proportions for each and every one of us, simply because we are the observers in the individually visible world, or rather worlds of our own lives, whatever the depth or multidimensionality of that state of being of ours may be. Furthermore, the observation definitions, so vital for the resulting state of being of our world, are nothing else but exactly our definitions of this entity of ours. Whatever the depth, width, and height, or other levels of dimensionality this entity of ours may encompass. Such thoughts have always been leading for me and have guided my interest in research in the fields of the human psyche, psychological linguistics, language pictography, and cryptography. In the course of my research of the above in relation to the archetypal characteristics of the collective unconscious, I became deeply involved in the study of several ancient languages and their writing systems, which brought me to the point of realization that pictographic thinking, expression, and writing are integral parts of the human psyche. With that in mind, I have continued for many years now my study of Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, among others, like the ancient Chinese and Native American early prototypes, trying to find a common link that would be the first and most archaic way of human expression. For the longest period of my life, I had believed that I had found the ultimate answers to my research hypothesis in the script of the early dynastic period in ancient Egypt, when suddenly I stumbled upon genuine Orphic and early Christian texts, which revealed to me a striking new picture of the beginnings of the human civilization. Through them I learned the emotionally moving and exciting revelation. My native land and my native people of Bulgaria were most likely the very cradle of the beginnings of human history, through our most ancient ancestors on the Balkans, the Thracians. With this, my lifetime work project entered its best and highest phase of research yet. Finally, after everything said and confessed to this point, it's about time to reassure my readers in the practical value of all the conclusions and research methods in this book. Many of them they will be able to apply for themselves in their own professional and or personal private lives. Needless to say, I am acutely aware that with this humble work of mine, I am neither producing the final word on the issue of the ancient Thracian script, nor bringing a closure to the thesis of my life's research on the origins of human archetypal thinking and expression. At this particular stage of my work, my goal will be considered adequately fulfilled if I have succeeded just opening the next door to the horizons of new insights and of the developing picture of our true origins and meaning. To this, let everyone feel welcome to add more, especially all honest scientists and colleagues of mine, who are in the privileged position of being able to employ the powerful methodology of transcendent science to the good of all human beings and our entire anthropomorphic cosmos. I dedicate my work to divine wisdom, to the altar of whom I have offered my creative energies and labors, hoping they will be remembered as a noble spark in the timeless efforts of all human beings, in their quest for the whole, complete, and ultimate truth, and a building block in the tower of knowledge of that truth, which breathes life in all living forms through the ages of the ages. Now, does all that's said so far have anything to do with Thrace and the decoding of the Thracian script at all? Why, yes it does. It has everything to do with it, and the following explains just why it does. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Matthew 6:22 and 23. And again, for as the eye of one is able to perceive, so is that person altogether. Ecclesiastes. So just how do we perceive our most ancient ancestors? Are we prone to seeing them as primitives, slaves of nature, illiterate Neanderthals? In this regard, we have been so brainwashed by years and years of scientific Darwinist propaganda that we have almost forgotten that the theory of evolution was only recently developed hypothesis, and for thousands of years prior to that, the most enlightened minds of our civilization were absolutely confident that mankind descended from God, was divine in nature. Never had it passed through their minds to humiliate and devaluate humanity so much as to propose that we were the descendants of apes. Thracian king Zer in Egypt. Here's just one of a number of secret Orphic texts, which relates to the supremacy of the Thracian culture, religion, and science in the then world. Because from the time of that descendant of the dynasty of the first Tiras, who was named after his father, namely King Tizer, or Tzer, for that's how his name was read in the Thracian speech, a new dynasty was established in Egypt. When the Thracian ships dropped anchor and debarked at the Nile Delta, where the first capital of Egypt at Buto was founded. Thus Thrace brought about the beginnings of the first dynasty of Egypt and inseminated and impregnated the land of Egypt with the ancient speech and writing. For the script of Thrace was the ancient speech, with whose imaginary signs, which are from Eden, and which were later received and stylized by all of the Egyptians, the secret chapters of the second epistle of Melchizedek, 1, 10, and 11. The Book of the Thracian Epistles, The City Foundation, Sophia, 2005. Another similar account of the ancient Thracians is recorded by the Roman historian of Jewish descent, Josephus Flavius, who wrote, Now Tiras, the son of Japhet, called the people over whom he ruled Thracians, or Thracians, but the Greeks later changed the name, calling them Thracians. Antiquity of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6, 1, 125. The Works of Josephus, translated by William Whiston, A.M., Hendrickson Publishers, 1987. Following historical records like the above, I decided to check them out for veracity and prove them either right or wrong. They sounded both curious and intriguing, and at the same time arousing a great deal of skepticism in regards to the facts of their record. So I had a lot of mixed feelings about spending valuable time on finding out the facts. Nevertheless, soon the ambition of the obstinate researcher in me won over the hesitation about the validity of the whole issue, and a final decision to proceed with the project was reached. The idea that fascinated me the most was, what just if the above obscure pieces of record about the Thracians proved to be a sound historical fact? This could change the whole picture of what we think we know about the earliest inhabitants of Europe, the Thracians. It was definitely worthwhile checking it out. After all, these same ancient Thracians were most likely the common ancient forefathers for the largest part of the whole continent of Europe. So the question I placed at the start of my research was the following. Was there anything in common between any ancient text ever found on artifacts in Egypt and any artifacts ever found in the land of ancient Thrace? most of which is in modern Bulgaria. My problem was knowing where to begin, or what to begin with, for that matter. One major thought kept pressing in, as the possible clue. Well, let's begin with the Thracian king Zer. To do that, I had to search for any registered events of an expedition, according to my source, quoted above, of a king of such a name in the early texts of ancient Egypt. In this discourse, I will save my audience the time and effort I had to spend in digging out material and information in libraries and through my scientific friends and correspondents around the world, as well as the inner controversies and arguments pro and against waging a little big war inside my own mind and soul in the quest for finding the truth. Here's the end result from a long search and the final answer to the puzzle. Yes, there is a king by the name Zer, but its anglicized version is spelled out Jer, or Djer, or so the Egyptologists say at least. That's it, Djer, first dynasty, the old kingdom of ancient Egypt. Is there anything ever written about him in the Nile Delta and the capital of Buto on any artifact ever found in Egypt? Yes, indeed. An ivory plate at the British Museum, dated by scientists to around 3000 before Common Era, with the following description. A plate from Abydos, referring to Djer's journey made to the delta city of Buto, one of Egypt's early capitals. This plate of Djer is not only an important piece of evidence supporting our hypothesis, prompted by the Orphic text analyzed above, but it turns out to be such a good specimen of very early ancient Egyptian writing that it would be an invaluable tool for comparison with any similarly ancient and possibly equally primitive or rather primordial type of writing that could be its progenitor in Thrace, or anywhere else in the world for this matter, if our Orphic lead proves itself to be true. But let's look at the Djer plate itself now. Our attention inadvertently focuses on the very primitive, or rather archaic, way in which the pictographic signs have been engraved. Then we try to pinpoint and identify the hieroglyphic of the name of Djer. We need this hieroglyph for a very special purpose. Remember what was written about his ancestral predecessor, bearing the same name as him, by the Roman historian Josephus. Now Tiras, i.e. Djer, the son of Japhet, called the people over whom he ruled Thracians, but the Greeks later changed the name, calling them Thracians. Antiquity of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6, 1. The works of Josephus, translated by William Whiston, A.M. Hendrickson. Publishers, 1987. Now, if we have correctly pinpointed the source and found out the ancient hieroglyph of the name of Djer, now judging from the above quote from Josephus, it could mean only one very important thing for our whole research. We have found the ancient hieroglyph, meaning not only Djer, but also Thracian and Thrace. According to Josephus, they are all but derivatives of that king's name. For a better analysis, in addition to the picture of the Djer plate above, we can also review the schematic presentation of the Djer plate as published in Peter Clayton's book, Chronicle of the Pharaohs, page 22, courtesy Thames and Hudson, 1994. This is a quite clear schematic drawing of the plate, which allows you to discern a few very important details. There are 4 visible rows of pictograms, hieroglyphs on this schematic presentation of the plate, kept at the British Museum, among which you can immediately identify the picture of a ship, the pictogram of the city of Buto, and the hieroglyph of the name of King Djer, and a sarek. Now, the sarek is a decorative element surrounding all royal names, and is a form of etiquette meaning His Majesty or His Royalty. Come on, let's pinpoint this particular pictographic sign. Let me help you some. Look in the upper left corner of the plate. Here it is, the invaluable Djer sign in the sarek. And what you see is up in the top left here with this bird sitting atop the box with 3 bars with a stroke through it, and then on the bottom a set of 4 bars. And as we already know from all said in this book so far, this is also the hieroglyph for Thrace and Thracian. It is not quite clear why this particular hieroglyph is found in one spot of the same text, drawn this way, and it appears as 4 T's, and in another way, that way, where it's 4 T's with the bar across midway. Not even mentioning the fact that it is also found in other texts from ancient Egypt, where it has been drawn in a variety of other versions, like the following few. 4 bars. One explanation may be that in ancient Egyptian writing, these varieties add specific attributes to the main ideogrammic or phonetic value of the pictogram. For Djer, Tiras, or Thrace, Thracian, which added attributes in the above given cases have the following respective meanings: the 4 pillars of the world, the backbone of the world, the spinal column, the divine words, scepters, the land of divine words, and megaliths or megalithic temples. Amazing, that's the 4 pillars. As a result of our findings about the deciphered plate kept at the British Museum, now we have acquired a pretty good idea of what to look for among similar artifacts found in Thrace, modern-day Bulgaria. Let us begin our search with the simplest and most logical thing to look for, the pictogram meaning Thrace itself. Since we have already identified its presence in ancient Egypt, isn't it just logical that it should be an even more common finding in the land of Thrace itself? Yes, indeed, and so in fact it is, as there are quite a few examples of its presence in present-day Bulgaria. For the purposes of our specific research in this book, we will focus our attention on just 2 such findings, proving the use so far of at least 2 of the above-listed versions of the pictograms of Thrace, which relate to the temple and liturgical traditions of ancient Thrace at the dynastic and start level. 1. The hieroglyph, meaning Thrace, with strong temple and megalithic connotations, is the central emblematic design widely present at the Royal Thracian funerary complex at Sveshter in Bulgaria. At this magnificent architectural structure, the above pictogram of Thrace can be seen stylized as the Thracian triglyph royal emblem, repetitively integrated in the ornamental sculptural frieze above the cherubic caryatid female guardians of the monarch, thus reflecting the state importance of this particular temple funerary complex as a national holy shrine of Thrace. In our second example, the Thracian hieroglyph, in its version signifying that Thrace is the land of divine words, has been often identified as part of the rich ornamentation upon silver and gold sacred vessels from the famous Thracian treasures found at many archaeological sites in Bulgaria. A more detailed analysis of the role of the sacred vessels of Thrace in the ancient liturgical practices and invocations is presented later in this summary and in chapter 10 of this book. The same hieroglyph was probably also the precursor of the very peculiar shape in Thracian I letter M in the Cyrillic phonetic alphabet, developed much later, of course, which is still in use in Bulgaria and other Slavic countries. And the letter appears as an M or as 3 T's connected together. Very sweeping in form and style. Now, since we have acquired a pretty good idea of what to look for, let us continue our search for other artifacts found in Thrace, modern-day Bulgaria, like, let's say, plates or tablets that may contain similar findings to those of the already analyzed deciphered plate kept at the British Museum. Have there ever been found any such so-called plates or tablets anywhere in the land of Thrace? Yes, indeed, quite a few. However, archaeologists have defined the finds as clay decorative appliques, pintadera seals, used for imprinting decorative designs upon pottery. Pictographic interpretation may be possible from the Thracian Atlantis Book 1, page 129. Authors Peter Detev and Jordan Detev, Bulgarian Multimedia Society of 2002. Now let us remember that we already learned from the principles of transcendent science about the exclusive role of the observer in any research platform. The problem which any observer faces is the proven by practice fact that each reality can be perceived only based on the perception and idea models. For as the eye of one is able to perceive, so is that person altogether. In other words, if a researcher starts out on the look for decorative pintaderas, he will most likely see in most tablets nothing else but more or less decorative pintaderas. This is why the starting hypothesis of the researcher is number one determinant for his correct scientific perception and for the final results and conclusions of his work. Now let's pick a decorative pintadera or 2 from the Thracian Neolithic era and start looking for something more than decorative elements, and see if there are any similarities perchance between the decorations on them and the pictographic signs from the deciphered tablet at the British Museum. A good pick for the purpose turned out to be 2 of the more famous finds of the pintadera type. First, because their numerous pictures had already hit the press for a few decades now, and secondly, because they had been found by archaeologists hundreds of miles apart, one in the Vratsa district of Bulgaria, and the other in the Nova Zagora district of Bulgaria. And they had already been dated by experts for a time origin of about 1,000 years apart, from the 5th and 4th millennium BCE respectively. The above-mentioned peculiarities made a lot of sense for our pick, exactly because their facts would help us eliminate any possibility for so-called exclusiveness of the object of our research. That term would apply if all the artifacts found were representative of one spot or one place only in a moment of time in history, which would automatically negate the validity of our research. In other words, the tablet from Gradisnica and the tablet from Karanovo presented an almost ideal opportunity for analysis of 2 quite separate time and space artifacts. which both contained engraved designs upon them, which looked from the beginning promising in terms of our hypothesis that they may contain some pictographic signs. In addition to that, however, they both were great candidates for our research, in terms of validity of whatever results came out in the end, as the two tablets could be viewed as representative of the larger area and time framework of a land perimeter halfway across Bulgaria, and at a time perimeter of about one whole millennium, or 1,000 years, from 5,000 BCE to 4,000 BCE. Now that we have already made our choice about the material objects of our research, let's begin examining them from different angles, turning them all possible directions, trying to identify any possible patterns of writing. No matter how hard we try, soon we have concluded the obvious, and you can surely come to the same conclusion, that there are no letter signs belonging to any known linear alphabet on either tablet. No Greek, no Phoenician, no Arabic, no Hebrew, etc. No alphabetic linear letter. Same cannot be said about possible pictographic signs, however, because from the very start, a few very primitive or rather archaic primordial drawings of non-stylized figures of men immediately capture the eye, and remind us of the quick hand or shorthand writing signs the ancient Egyptian scribes often used, instead of drawing the full graphics of the corresponding hieroglyphic pictograms. Some examples of such simplified hieroglyphs are presented here for your review, and you see them here. So far so good, however, this is not enough to reach any conclusions yet. Unless we are able to identify a lot more than just a few drawn, isolated figures on our tablets, all our efforts so far will have been prematurely ended with no significant results. It is precisely so, because unless there is some sort of syntax and or a meaningful context connection between all the different primitive signs already picked up by our vision, there can be no pictographic text, but just a few decorative drawings, which would have confirmed that we are dealing simply with decorative pintaderas. Luckily, my efforts paid off this time. The multiple pictographic signs that became gradually discernible in front of my very eyes upon each of the plates started literally shaping into something so full of richness of content and contextual integrity that it soon revealed a congruent ancient text of such power that it subdued my whole being to wonder and speechless awe, lasting for days, in view of the eternal meaning of this profound message. I am absolutely convinced that reading the next few pages, you will also be captivated by the same unspeakable sensation of being touched by the eternal spirit of divine wisdom that I felt touched by at my very first encounter with the words of the timeless messages left for us by our great ancestors some 4 and 5 millennia ago, on humble pieces of clay, which nevertheless survived for us to read today. Behold, the first decoded tablet from ancient Thrace is right in front of your eyes now. The votive tablet from the village of Gradishnitsa, the Neolithic Chalcolithic era, circa 5000 BCE. The tablet from Gradishnitsa contains 4 rows of pictographic signs, which are quite clearly visible upon the tablet's pictograph. They are presented in a computer-enhanced version and a schematic drawing, respectively in exhibits B and C. If there have been any other additional signs on the artifact that are presently not visible or discernible, these have not been taken into consideration for the purposes of our present reading of the text. The above identified pictographic signs look exactly like the hieroglyphic inscription presented as Exhibit D, and they are transcribed using the stylized later version of the pictographic script, known to us from the pyramid texts of ancient Egypt, beautifully rendered here in its computerized calligraphic print. Upon comparison, it becomes evident that the text displayed on Exhibit B, Exhibit C, and Exhibit D is absolutely one and the same identical text, and that the two calligraphic styles, respectively the early Thracian and the late Egyptian, represent one and the same identical pictographic script, which has come to us down the ages in its condition and appearance as seen on Exhibit A. The evident conclusions are as follows. The script used in the engravings upon the tablet of Gradishnitsa found in the land of ancient Thrace, and the scripts used in similar tablets and in the pyramid text found in ancient Egypt, represent one and the same identical hieroglyphic script. The tablet from Gradishnitsa, found in the land of ancient Thrace, predates similar artifacts found in Egypt by at least 2 millennia. Apparently this particular type of hieroglyphic script had originated and was first used in ancient Thrace, and it was later transferred and introduced in ancient Egypt. The early Thracian version of this hieroglyphic script was evidently used quite sparingly, predominantly as the sacred language of the initiated elite. It doesn't appear from the findings so far that it ever reached the levels of widespread utilization, which it found thousands of years later in its late Egyptian version. And here you see the tablets, the original and the computer enhanced, and the schematic and the computer schematic. The hieroglyphic text upon the tablet from Gradishnitsa can be read in the right to left direction, and his translation has the following or similar meaning, verse by verse. The three one God, Trinity or gods, encompasses, dwells in Thrace. O God, who are dwelling in the territory of Thrace. I witness to the truth. I give offerings to the great Son of God, or I promise to give offerings to the great Son of God. I glorify the great God, and I will praise you, O great God. The temple of God is a great fortress and a secret defended place. O God, who are in your temple, be my fortress and defend me. Deliver me from the enemy. And if we're to put the above text into our everyday lingo of our modern times, it might sound something like this. O three one God of the land of Thrace, I vow in truth to bring you all due offerings, O great Son of God, and only you shall I praise and exalt, O my God, for you are great. You who are now in your temple, I pray, hear me, keep me safe, and deliver me from all evil. From a technical linguistic point of view, it is worth noting here that the above text does not give us adequate clues as to the phonetic pronunciation of the Thracian words in it, or any information about exact phonetics or grammatical natures. But from the signs used on the tablet, only the hieroglyphic symbol meaning to or unto, as in give to or give unto, has a phonetic value of the linear alphabetic letter N, and is read N or N in the ancient Egyptian language. All the rest of the hieroglyphic signs engraved on the tablet are only ideograms in nature, and therefore their pronunciation could be identical to, similar to, or entirely dissimilar to that of ancient Egyptian speech. This very nature of the ancient pictographic script evidently placed it in the position of being the ideal universal international language among the initiated elites, simply because even people who had very different and unintelligible to each other spoken languages could still use this pictographic script as perfectly practical and intelligible means of communication between themselves, very much the same way as we nowadays use the international road signs for the purposes of regulating road traffic and global transportation, or I'd say planar transportation. The sacred tablet from the village of Karanovo, the Nova Zagora district, circa 4000 BCE. This tablet contains 2 rows of pictographic signs separated by a horizontal line, each one of which is quite clearly visible upon the tablet's photograph. The same are presented in computer-enhanced versions and in schematic drawings, each respectively in Exhibits B and Exhibit C. Please note that the signs engraved under the horizontal line are inverted, i.e. head down, and the tablet needs to be turned 180 degrees around to full diametrical opposition so that the reading of the second row of text can be accomplished. After the above rotation, the second row of the engraved pictograms is presented below and its corrected upright position for easier reading. Now all of the above identified pictographic signs look exactly like the hieroglyphic inscriptions presented in the exhibits when they are transcribed, using the stylized later version of the pictographic script, known to us from the pyramid text of ancient Egypt, and beautifully rendered here in its computerized calligraphic print. Upon comparison, it becomes evident that each of the rows of text, displayed on exhibits B, C, and D, is absolutely one and the same identical text, and that the 2 calligraphic styles, respectively the Thracian and the late Egyptian, represent one and the same identical pictographic script, which has come to us down the ages in its condition and appearance as seen on Exhibits A. The evident conclusions, just like in the previous case, are as follows. The script used in the engravings upon the tablet of Karanova found in the land of ancient Thrace are the same scripts used in similar tablets found in ancient Egypt. They're identical hieroglyphic script. The tablet from Karanovo, found in the land of ancient Thrace, predates similar artifacts found in Egypt by at least 1 millennium. Apparently, this particular type of hieroglyphic script had originated and was used first in ancient Thrace, and was later transferred and introduced in ancient Egypt. The early Thracian version of this hieroglyphic script was evidently used quite sparingly, predominantly as the sacred language of the initiated elite. It doesn't appear from the findings so far that it ever reached the levels of widespread utilization which it found thousands of years later in its late Egyptian version. Hieroglyphic text upon the tablet from Karanovo can be read either in the right to left or in the left to right because of the symmetrical position of the pictograms around a central axis. Its translation, following the well-established rules for translating Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, has the following or similar meaning, verse by verse. The earthly human realm is separated by the grave, and the guardian of the resurrection between the living and the dead, from the fiery divine realm. Through the mystery of death and resurrection, the earthly human becomes a divine being. Falsehood, a lie, and injustice reigns in the lower earthly realm, while truth and justice reigns supreme in the upper divine realm. The one who has been initiated has exchanged his crown of the lower realm for the high crown of the upper realm, and has passed from falsehood into truth, ruling with the high priestly scepter of truth and justice now firmly in his hand. If we were to put the above text into the everyday lingo of our modern time, it would sound something like this. Whosoever has been initiated in the mystery of death and resurrection, he has been born anew, and his new nature is divine. He has left all falsehood and has come to know the truth. He now reigns in justice and truth, with the scepter and crown of the upper realm, being the ruler of both the upper and lower worlds. Just as before, from a technical linguistic point of view, it is worth noting that the text does not give us adequate clues to the phonetic pronunciation of the Thracian words, or any information about phonetics, but that the signs used can be used to decipher the meaning. The text of the tablet from Caranovo inevitably brings to memory the documented text from a couple of other tablets written in Linear Greek over 3,000 years later. They are known as the Orphic ivory tablets from Olbia, tablet number 1 and 2 out of 5, discovered in 1951 and carbon dated around 500 BCE. A detailed description of the Olbia tablets is found in the book The Thracian Dionysus, Invocation and Faith, New Bulgarian University, Sofia 2002, by Professor Alexander Foll, who wrote the following. The first one of the 5 tablets is engraved with the text formula, life, death, life, truth, and Iopoikoi is visible under that formula. Interpreted from its ethnic Orphic language, it brings forth the revelation that life is death, and death is life in the beyond, where true knowledge, truth, is to be found, i.e. death reveals and opens the way to true knowledge. All hesitation is gone upon examination of the second tablet. One of its sides reads, Peace, War, Truth, Falsehood, and below that row, Ion. The revelation is now complete, stating that true knowledge, found beyond death, is also peace, in opposition to war and falsehood, which are contrary to the Orphic teaching. The pictographic vocabulary of the words used in the text from the Thracian tablet and some related ideograms.